Dust always settled the same way at the edge of town, as if time itself had chosen to pause there, holding the moment in gentle suspension. Nokomi's gray willow had learned to watch it while her hands worked, threading the needle with steady precision, each stitch a whisper of survival. The cloth in her lap was not hers by right, everyone knew that, but she carried it anyway, a quiet rebellion against circumstance. The air smelled of sage, horse sweat, and the dry dust that always clung to the town's corners. She kept her back straight, her eyes lowered, as though humility alone could carve her a space in this small judgmental world. Something lingered in the drifting dust, waiting to be noticed. Her sister, Eliza Grey Willow, had once owned this porch with her laughter and her nimble fingers. People came for her skill, for the way her hands coaxed cloth into perfection. But illness had thinned her voice and bent her spine until even breathing became a careful act. Nokomi's remembered the day Eliza pressed the basket of thread into her hands. No words were spoken. There were none that could hold the weight of that silent plea. Survival did not ask permission. It leaned close and whispered, and Nokomi's answered by showing up the very next morning. Coins were laid on the table rather than placed in her hand, eyes slid past her without acknowledgement, and gratitude arrived hesitant, if it came at all. Each rejection became a stitch in her growing resilience. Hanya Crow was a man who seemed to belong to the wind. At 30, his face bore the lines of seasons and long journeys, and his eyes carried the silence of grief that had learned to stand alone. He walked past the mending shop every few days, boots carving the same groove in the dirt, until one day the tear in his coat became impossible to ignore. He laid the garment on the table without meeting Nokomi's gaze and left as quickly as he came. She felt his presence linger long after he had gone, a quiet weight that was not heavy but attentive. Something in the way she worked seemed to echo a wound he had learned to recognize in silence. Days passed, and Hanya returned again with a heavier coat, its lining torn like a memory too sharp to bear. This time he stopped outside the shop longer, hesitating as if unsure whether to enter. Nokomi's added an extra layer of warmth where no one could see, stitching care into the fabric as though it could patch the hidden gaps in hearts. When she returned it, their fingers brushed, a fleeting touch that felt louder than any words. Hanya left a sack of flour beside the door, claiming it was payment, though it was an offering of something more, something unspoken. The town noticed the exchanges, whispers quickened, and eyes that had dismissed her began to linger. Then came Marshal Hale, walking into the shop with a badge catching the sunlight like a warning. He spoke of permits and ownership, of rules meant to govern space, and his voice, polite yet cutting, left Nokomi still and unflinching. From the back room came Eliza's cough, frail and fragile, reminding all present that illness had a voice louder than any law. The marshal left her with a deadline, the quiet weight of a week to comply or step aside. That night, Nokomi's packed her basket of thread and cloth, not out of resignation but as a ritual of readiness. The shop smelled of worn wood and determination, and she listened to her sister's shallow breathing until dawn. Hanya watched the marshal leave and felt an old ache stir in him, the memory of standing silently while someone else struggled. He did not enter immediately, instead leaning against a post across the street, observing Nokomi's as she gathered herself piece by piece. When he finally stepped inside, he placed a small pile of coins on the table and said nothing of the marshal or the law. He only said that he would keep bringing work, that he would pay for what was seen and what was hidden, and that he would no longer pretend distance was safety. Nokomi's looked into his eyes and felt, for the first time, that she did not have to bear everything alone. She nodded once, a small movement but one heavy with choice and trust. Over the following weeks, Hanya's visits became more frequent. He brought work that was complicated, torn beyond repair, asking her to mend it carefully, testing her skill and her patience. Each time he watched quietly, learning her rhythms, respecting her space. He never spoke of the future at first. He only stayed long enough to leave her with a sense that she mattered, that she was not invisible. Nokomi's, cautious but curious, began to look forward to these silent interactions. The moments of shared pauses, of hands passing fabric and thread, became the language through which they understood one another. One evening, as the sun sank low and painted the town in gold, Hanya lingered by the door longer than usual. He watched Nokomi's pack away the day's work, her face calm but tired. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, the words hesitant but deliberate. "I can't keep pretending that I'll just pass by and leave things as they are. You matter to me, Nokomi's. Not just this work, not just this town. He stopped, swallowed and looked away, his hands fidgeting with a loose thread on the counter. Will you marry me?" Nokomi's froze, her breath caught between disbelief and hope. She had never expected declarations, never expected promises so openly spoken, yet in his silence between words she felt the sincerity. She looked at his weathered hands, the weight of his life carried in every line, and knew he had waited, watched, and chosen carefully. She nodded slowly, then whispered, "Yes." It was a yes that carried every ounce of trust she had learned in these months of quiet observation. Hania exhaled, relief softening the lines of his face, and in that moment, the dust outside seemed to settle, approving and still. The wedding was quiet, held on the edge of town under the same golden sun that had witnessed their slow courtship. Neighbors whispered softly, curious, some disapproving, but none could dim the gravity of the bond forged in silent understanding. Nokomi's wore a simple dress, sewn by her own hands, and Hania's coat, once torn and threadbare, was repaired and pressed, symbolizing the care and patience that had built their connection. They exchanged vows in whispers and glances rather than grand speeches, promising attention, respect, and shared life. After the wedding, life settled into a gentle rhythm. Nokomi's continued her work, now confident that her skill and her presence had value beyond mere survival. Hania remained by her side, not in domination but as equal support, fetching supplies, repairing fences, helping with deliveries, and sharing small daily gestures that communicated more than words ever could. The townspeople began to notice, slowly adjusting to the idea that the quiet seamstress and the solitary cowboy had formed something permanent. Eliza's health, though never perfect, began to improve. The relief of knowing her sister's place was secure, coupled with Nokomi's presence, gave her strength she had not felt in years. She took up lighter sewing tasks, teaching what she could to young girls who visited the shop. Her laughter, though softer than before, returned in small bursts, weaving its way through the shop like a gentle melody. The sisters, once bound by duty and illness, now shared a bond that had grown deeper through adversity, quiet care, and the presence of Hania, whose patient love held them both in its stead. One evening, as they all sat together watching the sun dip below the horizon, Hania handed Nokomi's mended coat. "You've made everything better," he said, his voice low but full, "not just the cloth." She leaned against him, feeling the warmth of his hand rest on hers. Eliza smiled from her rocking chair, and for the first time in months she felt truly safe. The dust outside moved gently, unhurried, a silent witness to a life carefully stitched together by patience, courage, and love. Time passed. Seasons changed. The mending shop became a home not just of work but of belonging. Nokomi's and Hania moved seamlessly into life together, their love expressed not in grand gestures but in small acts of devotion, mutual respect, and shared silence. Eliza's presence reminded them daily that love was not just for the young or the strong, but for those who had endured and chosen connection over isolation. And as the sun set each evening over the quiet town, dust dancing in golden light, it seemed to say that even in a world of judgment and struggle, hearts could find their own sanctuary, stitched with care, patience, and unspoken understanding.